And we find CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion there on the Hill. So, Nikole, we know this is very much a fluid situation, but what have we learned about what's actually in the bill and how much it differs from some earlier versions?
Well, basically, this is kind of a repackaged version of what we have seen over the last couple of days in terms of containing an extension of government funding through mid-March of next year. Also, this still includes disaster aid for those hit severely by natural disasters like Hurricanes Helene and Milton, more than $100 billion in aid, as well as an additional $10 billion in direct economic assistance for farmers. Now, what is not in this package is an increase or suspension of the debt limit. That is something that President-elect Trump had pushed for. That was part of the version that House lawmakers voted on yesterday, which went down in flames, more or less, but again, kind of retains those core elements of not only the package that the president-elect supported, but also that bipartisan bill that was introduced on Wednesday, which never got a vote. So we'll see how things proceed with this particular package. Right now, lawmakers have been discussing it, and we anticipate a vote could happen in short order.
And Nikole, we know that one of the challenges is going to be to get Democrats on board with this version, especially since Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries was saying that they felt like they've been jerked around by Republicans after they had come to agreement on a bipartisan deal. But now, without it having that provision that the president-elect has demanded it needed in terms of the debt ceiling, might there be additional defectors from the Republican side? What does it sound like for you and the sources out there on the Hill that you've been talking to about its ability to actually pass?
Well, again, I think we'll have to see, in terms of talking to a number of House Republicans as they emerged from a meeting earlier this afternoon, as they were looking at potential options. One option at one point was just doing a straight extension of government funding, and one lawmaker told me it might be better to just keep things simple and kind of deal with all of these other things later. However, I would note in terms of that disaster aid piece, that is something that is really critical to a number of lawmakers, particularly those in the Southeast. And over in the Senate, there are already some senators who had threatened to filibuster any bill that came over that didn't include that disaster aid. So it continues to be this difficult needle to thread in terms of, trying to please the Trump wing of the party, trying to potentially maybe get Democrats on board, trying to get something that will pass muster in the Senate. So we really don't know until we see the vote for ourselves.
Yeah, and that debate is currently happening right now. I'm going to show our viewers a live look at the House floor right now. We know that lawmakers are going to continue debating this for a while. Do we have a sense, Nikole, when exactly we can expect a vote?
Well, I wish I could look into my crystal ball, Lana, and tell you it's going to happen.
I count on you for these things.
6:42 and 35 seconds, but
set your
we
watches.
do not know that precisely. But we expect it in short order. I mean, as we saw with the bill yesterday, there was a short period of debate, and then they proceeded with that vote. And because they are trying to do this, it appears that they're trying to do this through a suspension of the rules. That kind of expedites the process, but it also requires a higher threshold of votes. So that's why it's a little tricky to, figure out whether or not there's going to be enough support, because that bar will be a little higher.
And you and I have been through these before, and we both know that the pressure starts to increase on a holiday weekend when lawmakers want to get out of town and back to their families. Do we expect that as soon as it passes the House, because you mentioned the Senate, that it still needs to clear the Senate as well, that senators are on board, or might there also be a lot of wrangling that has to happen there?
Well, I think less wrangling will be unlikely. Obviously, Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, said earlier that he believes the best path forward is a bipartisan one. And so, as I mentioned, this rebundled package that the House is now considering still contains some elements of that bipartisan agreement in terms of including the disaster aid, the farm aid, and then, of course, that extension of funding through March. So, obviously, it strips away a lot of those extra provisions that Democrats had negotiated. And so that continues to be a source of concern for some congressional Democrats, although others told me, look, to your point, many are anxious to get out of here, so they may just have to take what they can get.
All right, Nikole, Killion, we know you're following all of it for us also on this holiday Friday. Thank you.
You bet.
CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns is in West Palm Beach, Florida, where she has been following the president-elect. So, Caitlin, let's talk about the Trump factor in all of this, because on Thursday, the president-elect was threatening any GOP lawmakers that didn't support raising the debt ceiling would get primaried and risk losing their seats in Congress. But we saw 38 House Republicans voting no on the bill that would do what Trump wanted. So how is the president-elect taking those defections? How is he potentially feeling about this version of the bill?
Yeah, Lana, I mean, all the action is happening on Capitol Hill, but here in West Palm Beach, this is where the bombs are being thrown, essentially the wrenches thrown into this whole process. And the president-elect said that he wanted a debt ceiling suspension included in anything that they do. He also wanted all of the Democratic priorities that were put into that original package to be stripped out. And this complicated everything, to say the least. They've had to go back to the drawing board several times. But you're right to note those 38 Republican lawmakers who, despite the bill yesterday being endorsed by President-elect Trump, endorsed by Elon Musk, and others, still voted against it. And that speaks to kind of the core problem that Speaker Johnson faces, not only on this issue, but budget resolutions to come next year and other pieces of legislation dealing with the budget, because there's a group of very conservative lawmakers predating Donald Trump who don't like these kinds of spending bills, think that there should be cuts made to spending in return for an increase in the debt limit. And that's a position that they really haven't moved from over the years. So it speaks to this question of how much power does Donald Trump have over these members? Yes, he's been threatening to run people against people who vote against this bill. But those are a lot of Republicans, and they seem to be confident in sticking together against these kinds of bills. So we'll see what the vote looks like today, but it also points to the reason why Johnson had to work with Democrats to get something done in the first place. And
it's quite a mess when you're looking at it from a philosophical perspective for Republicans, especially so many who are fiscally conservative that don't want to see increased spending and an increase to the debt limit without cuts. But, Caitlin, I want to go back to something else that you said, because you were talking about how this is going to get pushed into future budget deals, because I think we need to just make sure that our viewers all understand that what's being debated right now is a continuing resolution. This is just kicking the can. And even with the continuing resolution that Republicans say that they have now, the next government funding deadline would then happen in Trump's term. So I'm wondering, Caitlin, how might that affect the president-elect's agenda?
Yeah, Lana, that's such a good point, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because this is just a temporary measure. And the original thinking with the original bill was, let's get Congress back into, cover the government spending through the first few months of the year, and then Republicans will control everything and have better leverage when it comes to funding certain priorities of this administration. But this scenario, paints a complicated road ahead. And it's notable that House Republicans, while they'll have the majority again next year, they will have a slimmer majority. I mean, Donald Trump picked several House Republicans for his cabinet, so there are going to be vacancies, and Democrats gained a couple of seats. So the margin is slimmer than it is in the House next year than it is now. So this raises a lot of questions about, how Republicans can move forward, not only on spending bills, but on really any item on the president-elect's agenda when it comes to next year. And especially if, thinking about how long this budget resolution lasts, what they end up coming up with, they could be having to deal with this even sooner.
And Caitlin, since this is the Weekender and we usually like to give a little bit more perspective and context, I just want to get you to weigh in on how unusual this is for a president-elect to be together with Elon Musk, somebody who's not formally a member of the cabinet, calling these shots before even taking that oath.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable that day that this bill essentially sank, because all throughout the day, President-elect Trump had been pretty quiet, not weighing in on this bill. It was Elon Musk who really led the charge in derailing it, and that put a lot of attention on, Elon Musk's role here and whether he is essentially in charge. And it kind of prompted Democrats to call him Speaker Musk, to call him President Musk, and try to get under President-elect Trump's skin here a little bit. So we'll see what that relationship looks like. But the interesting thing about Musk is, and we've talked about this a lot this week, obviously he's tasked with running this DOGE committee, this agency in the next administration that would target government spending and try to weed out waste. But this process shows that he does have a lot to learn about how the budget process works, how government works, right? This is an outsider coming in, trying to shake things up. And I think this process showed that it's very difficult to do, and this is unlike, running the federal government, of course, is unlike running any kind of business.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns covering the president-elect in West Palm Beach. Thank you.